John says, talk about the obsession some fans have with Dabo not using the portal and creating the same revolving door, quote, successful, unquote, in quote, coaches use. Eye roll emoji. Obviously, a little bit of sarcasm there from John Sarian. KJ Henry recently came out and basically said, hey, I wouldn't even, this is from him, I'm paraphrasing him. KJ Henry said he wouldn't even be at Clemson if Dabo Swinney treated players the way that some fans want players to be treated, want Dabo to treat them, as far as like, hey, if you're not good enough, if you're not getting developed fast enough, I'm going to go ahead and go to the portal and jump you. And, good luck and good riddance kind of thing. KJ Henry, Al, remember when we first did this show, I believe KJ Henry was very young, and I remember you and I discussing about how he was a guy who was really a 5-star guy, top 25 guy in the nation, but a developmental guy. I mean, when you look at his body, he was a basketball player at the time, right? And then you also had discussion from the staff that he just really wasn't vocal. He wasn't a leader, really. Well, that's completely changed now from what he was before to what he is now. Can you say on the list of developmental guys, there's a lot of fans, there's no Dabo hasn't developed anybody. Dabo's coaches haven't developed anybody. I would say, let's start from the top here. From the horse's mouth, KJ Henry, he said he's glad that Dabo is loyal. He's glad that Dabo doesn't just go to the portal and jump people. He's glad and he's thankful that he came to Clemson, and he wouldn't even have came to Clemson. So all these people that saying, go to the portal and it's not going to hurt recruiting. KJ Henry says the opposite. So would you put KJ Henry in that list of developmental guys that got better from when they started, even though he's a 5-star guy? And what are your thoughts on what he said?
Oh, without a doubt, he's one of those developmental guys. And I mean, there's been several of those success stories over the years, so don't let anybody fool you there. What's crazy is, we want these guys, we want these 5 stars, we want these high 4 stars or whatever it may be. We want them to be an impact from day one as freshmen. We've gotten so greedy as fans, especially in Clemson, when we were used to 3 stars and some 2 stars and, the occasional 4, and now we're netting 4s all the time and, a few 5s here and there as well. It's a fascinating thing that we do. And it's like, look, if they're not contributing by year 2, people are calling them a bust. It's insane. Some people just take longer to get there. Some people show 5-star tools in high school, and they're able to get away with it because it's high school. They don't have to be as technical. They don't have to know the game as well. And then when they get to college, it takes a little while to get used to it and the step up of competition and the knowledge level and whatnot. And KJ Henry has done that. He's really, he's taken care of his body. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten to know the game better. And he's become a dominant player. I don't like that he's teasing Clemson fans, that he pretends he may or may not come back. Unless he's actually going to come back, I may not forgive him for that, because Clemson is desperate for some defensive ends to come back next year, whether it be Brzee, whether it be Henry, whether it be XT. I think all 3 of them need to come back and shore up the defense for next year. But yeah, I think it's his comments are great. I don't know. Did he say he wouldn't have come to Clemson or he wouldn't be at Clemson? Because I think there's an important distinction there.
I guess so. I mean, I took it as he wouldn't come to Clemson when he said wouldn't be at Clemson, but he did say the word be at Clemson. So,
okay. I'm going to assume what he means by that is that after the first couple of years, he didn't, meet expectations, so to speak. If Dabo would have recruited somebody, then he may have jumped ship and gone somewhere else. That's what I'm going to assume. Surely he wouldn't just not come to Clemson because Dabo uses the portal, because everybody else uses the portal. So if he's going to knock Dabo before he knock everybody else. So that's what I'm going to assume he meant by that. But yeah, his comments are spot on. Henry's been a great guy for the program. And I, for one, as every other Clemson fan, hope he comes back next year.
Now, Houston, I wanted to get your thoughts on another part of the discussion, which is how important recruiting is and evaluation of those players. Because if you are going to say, hey, we're only going to use the portal when it's absolutely necessary, and Dabo says, hey, you forget, a lot of people want to show and give examples of Josh Heupel. They want to give examples of, the guy at Michigan State. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but they want to look at these examples like USC and Lincoln Riley and Texas and these examples of teams and Miami and where they had to kind of come in and rebuild quickly. Dabo says, hey, I'm not in that situation. Don't put me in that bucket. I don't need to go out and get 14, 15 guys. Actually, to be honest with you, if you look at my roster on the Morgan T show on Twitter, they don't have enough room for 14 transfers. They would have to you would literally have to sit other guys down and say, hey, get out. Your scholarship's done. So that goes back to what KJ's saying is, these guys, Dabo puts a value and it goes back to the slow offer. Everybody knocks him for slow offers, but he's being purposeful. How important is recruiting when you have that mindset?
I mean, look, I think that the way that they do it is interesting enough. It's beneficial for the recruit they go after. I think people just think that, and look, I'm always going to have a very hostile opinion to most people that are knuckle dragging, mouth breathing imbeciles on mouth boards or on message boards. That's just kind of how I view it for people who knock Dabo for how he handles this. But it's intentional. It's intentional with the way that he goes about his students. He's not stupid. He knows what he's doing. He knows that they've identified a candidate or a recruit, and it's almost like a marriage or a relationship. This is a relationship through recruiting that they do. And it's why that it's not just something to get them into Clemson. It's a holistic approach. So yeah, you see some guys transfer out of Clemson. That's going to happen with every single school. But most of the time, you might have a handful of guys that just don't jive with Clemson. That's fine. You have a handful of guys that will eventually maybe see the writing on the wall that if they're going to increase their draft stock, they need to go somewhere else. Totally fine as well. But for the most part, it's it's one of these things that from the start of the recruitment all the way through graduation, it's something that Clemson is going to stick with their guys. It's their guys. And sometimes it may not be the most glitziest thing in the world, but I think that while it's not evident right now, I'd be willing to go out and bet that in the next 5 to 6 years, it's going to be more beneficial and helpful to Clemson instead of having situations, where you're relying completely on NIL, portal transfers. It's going to make your roster get out of whack real quick if you catch something the wrong way. And something that I'm interested to see, people are mad that we didn't go after these 2 wide receivers that ended up at Georgia. And look, I'll go ahead and say Georgia could end up winning a national championship with both those guys. They're both really good. So I don't want to discount that. However, you're getting 2 alphas from 2 separate teams. They were the leading receivers on both their teams. So what might happen when one of those guys doesn't get the touches that they want? Are they going to get mad? Are they going to transfer in the middle of the season? What's going to happen there? Are you going to have a situation? You're going to have a lot of teams that are doing the current things now that are going to end up like Texas A&M did this year, where you relied heavily on something that you think you're getting smarter than everybody else, and then it erodes your locker room. And that's a lot of different streets with NIL and the transfer portal. And I'm not saying that Dabo doesn't use that. He does. He uses NIL in a holistic sense. And then he'll use the transfer portal when it's absolutely necessary. So relax. He's got his way about going about things. I think it's going to be something that pays off for Clemson in the long run.
Well, also Barrett Carter came out and said, hey, I don't really care about who he brings in. I'm going to keep trying to do my best. You also want that mentality as well, because if you get guys on your roster that are constantly worried about getting jumped, they're not focused on being the starter themselves or being their best self and developing themselves. If they're constantly looking over their shoulder or out the window or on social media, worried about who Clemson is going to recruit, you have to go out there and compete. And I think that most of the players out there on Clemson's team are guys that want to compete, because that's who they go after, is not guys that are just going to want to be given opportunities, but want to compete for opportunities.